Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
I welcome everyone for today's FOF. It is an interesting topic. For those who don't know me, I am Raunak Onkar. I work with the research team at PPFAS Mutual Fund. So last year in September, me and my wife went to watch this amazing movie, Mission Impossible. This is the 5th iteration of the movie. And I'm the kind of person who likes to go early for movies because there are some films, some directors are crazy. They have a scene right before the opening credits for those people who come early. It's like people come on time, so they respect them and they show something which other people cannot see afterwards. So I'm that person and they respect me. And I went and sat there. The theater was almost empty and did not fill afterwards. It was like the movie came in August, 4th week, afternoon time. Theater was empty. Me and my wife were watching this movie. And out of nowhere, I saw this. And I had never felt like I lived under a rock, but when I saw this, Alibaba pictures, I for a second thought that this is some other company whose name is similar to the Alibaba, the Chinese e-commerce company, and they are producing movies, which I found unlikely. So I went on Google, and the guys behind me were like, hey, shh, don't manka. But still, I figured out that Alibaba had also ventured into making movies. A 14-year-old company, its teens, and as if e-commerce was not done yet, they wanted to also produce movies, and that too, high budget, expensive film with Tom Cruise. Incidentally, September 2014, we met at FOF and we had this interesting discussion on the changing world of retail. Where we saw some very common e-commerce trends and what trends are happening in offline retail space. It also coincided with the IPO of Alibaba, which some call the biggest tech IPO ever. But at that time I was not so conversant with the company, so I just left it in the open. Alibaba immediately became one of the top 10 market cap companies in the world when it listed the Alibaba Group on the New York Stock Exchange. So Alibaba's founder Jack Ma has this to say about IPOs. He says that e-commerce IPO is like stopping at a gas station to refill your car for the long ride ahead. And you will know what it means when you see how this guy thinks. But for the shareholders who were so enthusiastic about getting to own a part of Alibaba Group, they may not have been so enthused so far. This is the price as of yesterday, and you can see the trend. It's probably down 16% since its IPO. But the company has done much better as it was at that time. So let's go into the world of Alibaba. So just to give you an idea of the scale of things, okay? So Alibaba has 407 million annual active buyers on their e-commerce platform. These are buyers, not users. The users will be much more because they will come on the site, they will not transact. So when you say 407 million, like 40 crore people actively buying every year, this is our internet population in India, by the way. But they have these active people who are buying on their platform. This is only one e-commerce site. 39 crores mobile monthly average users. So these are active users of the Alibaba app of any form. And of course, there's no need to show the growth numbers because it's an e-commerce company. The growth numbers will always look like a trajectory. Again, gross merchandise value has also grown. Alibaba, interestingly, also has Ali Cloud business, which has grown more than double in the past 1 year. And it also generates free cash flow. So the story sounds a little similar, right? You know, Amazon, Alibaba, free cash flow, cloud, e-commerce, huge number of users. Well, let's see. So just to give an idea, the revenue breakup, more than 80% of the revenue comes from Alibaba's e-commerce websites in China, and the rest of it from other areas. And you can see that China commerce retail, the biggest chunk, has also grown 35%. It's a 14-year-old company. I don't know if any company can say that, but Alibaba can surely say, "Mere paas maa hai." Because the story of Alibaba is incomplete without really knowing the story of its iconic and crazy founder, Jack Ma. who's also called lovingly as Crazy Jack. And he is the same person, okay? He's the same guy. In case you're wondering. So this is the 10th anniversary of Alibaba, and 16,000 employees in the stadium cheering Alibaba, and Jack Ma emerges from the stage in this costume, singing Elton John's "Can You Feel the Love Tonight?" And no wonder they call him Crazy Jack. But I had some help, some really good help in researching this company and this person. First one is a recently released book by Duncan Clark called Alibaba, the House That Jack Ma Built. And interestingly, this book came at the opportune time when I was reading about Alibaba, and I was actually quite worried that I don't have enough time to read through all the historical materials and articles to research this particular presentation and what do I present in. This book came and I'm really glad for it. And it gives some interesting cultural context of how e-commerce has shaped up China and how China has been shaped by e-commerce. Another interesting book which came a couple of years back is Alibaba's World, written by this guy, Porter Harrison, who was the VP of PR for Alibaba for 9 years, I guess. Interestingly, he made a documentary called Crocodile in the Yangtze. It's about Alibaba and Jack Ma. And the title is so appropriate, and it's based on what Jack Ma had said about, and we'll see that later. So basically these three resources, plus the company's financial statements and reporting and updates that analyst reports have been giving, I could build a very interesting picture of what Alibaba Group actually is. But to know about Alibaba, like I said, you have to know about Jack Ma. And Jack Ma came from a very poor family, from a province called, city called Hangzhou, in the province of Zhejiang. I am really bad at pronouncing this name, so please pardon me and correct me if I'm wrong. So growing in a poor neighborhood and having a school which did not have English tutors, and you're in the middle of the cultural revolution of Mao, and you have no idea what the outside world is like, and the country is not open. So everybody had the same future prospects, and you all had to compete for the same things. So it was quite bleak in a way. There was no differentiation amongst people and peers. So in a way, Jack Ma had this interest for learning the English language. And one day his teacher told him that he spotted some foreign tourists near a hotel called Shangri-La in Hangzhou city. So he did not waste the opportunity, he just went there so that he could practice his English language skills. And he befriended an Australian family who he has still good relations with, and he traveled to Australia later on. So you can know that Jack Ma is not the kind of guy who would get tied down by local customs and local mores, and he will want to go out and explore. And that's what he did. So once he could confidently speak in English, and he was reasonably old enough to probably seek a job, he did not have good grades to go into a good college to further educate himself professionally. So by luck or whatever, I don't know, he got into a teaching college, which is the last place who would offer him education, and he taught himself to be an English teacher. So, well, that's a simple story, right? An English teacher teaching in Hangzhou. What future can you have? But one day Alibaba, the legend goes that Jack Ma one day saw his professor coming from school and going home, carrying his bags, and he's quite old. So he imagined that, am I going to be like this when I grow old? And is this my future? I mean, can we do something for our country? Can we do something for myself to uplift from this particular scenario? So he decides to go the entrepreneur's way, and he starts a translation company called Hope Translation. All the names are also upbeat and positive. And the moment he starts that, he realizes that how does he advertise himself? How does he know? How do people know that I am this translating company? And few of his friends are coming together and doing this. So he gets an opportunity, totally not related to his translation company, to go to the US, and he grabs it. And this is to negotiate some contract between some person who cannot speak English and with an American. So he goes to America, and little does he know, he basically gets conned, and he gets kidnapped. It's an amazing story. I don't know, I'm not making this up, it's in the book, so you can figure it out. He gets kidnapped and he escapes, and he goes to his friends in Seattle, and then the story continues. But before that, Jack Ma is the founder of a tech company, okay? But listen to this. One of the reasons why Alibaba survived is because I know nothing about computers. What? I'm like a blind man riding on the back of a blind tiger. And it may sound cryptic, but actually straightforward. So when Jack Ma was seen in the early 90s in China, there is no communication technology. He had seen America being such forward in terms of having internet in everybody's homes. So he knew the opportunity existed. That's what he meant by the blind tiger. But he's blind because there is no direction for the opportunity. So when he went to Seattle to his friend's place, his friend introduced him to a computer which had an internet connection. He said, Jack, this is internet. And Jack had no idea what to do with the computer. So his friend told him, search for anything you want. So Jack, in his characteristic way, put in beer. And he saw American beer, German beer. So he thought, okay, why not Chinese beer? Because he drinks beer in China. So he searched for Chinese beer, no results came out. Then he searched for China, nothing. And he was puzzled, this is internet, right? It should have all information. Why is there nothing on China? So his friend tells him that you have to put some content up on the website so that it will become Chinese content. So he says, fine, just put up my translation company's page and let's see what happens. So his friend and Jack, they create this website for his translation company, put his contact details and email address. And Jack has no idea what is happening. He's just like watching. This happens at 9:30 in the morning, the website is live, and Jack has no idea what to do. So 12:30 his friend calls him from work. He says, Jack, 5 people have responded to your website. He has no idea what to even make of it. He said, what do you mean responded? They have sent you emails. He said, what is an email? So, I mean, from that, to go back to China, he basically lugged the entire computer with him, went to China, and decided that this is the opportunity to introduce Chinese people to the internet, or at least introduce the world to Chinese businesses.
Which year was that?
This is in 1993. So he came back, and the entrepreneurial bug had still written. So he said, I'll start a company which will list all the local businesses in China. And started a Yellow Pages kind of an online company called China Pages. But there is no internet. So how will you tell the customer whose listing is going to be on the site that your site is there? So basically he felt like a con man for a long time, trying to give something which is not existing anywhere. Nobody can see the proof. So he devised a plan. So I don't have internet. So he designed a website with his hand for all the clients that he had. Sent the designs to US by courier. They made the website, they uploaded it, they created the web page and sent printed copies of the web pages back to China to just convince the customers that this is your website. So this is the kind of pain points they had in a city like Hangzhou, which is now a very buzzing town. So when the internet came to Hangzhou, finally in 1995, it took Jack some 3.5 hours to download one web page, just to show a client that his site exists. So you can see how backward they were at that time. But Jack is a singularly focused guy. So he says that if there are 9 rabbits on the ground, if you want to catch one, just focus on one. Change your tactics if you need to, but don't change the rabbit. Get one first, put it in your pocket, and then catch the others. And Jack had this vision of putting all the businesses online, listed online, so that businesses outside China can spot them and give them business. Because we know China is the world's factory, and the industrial revolution that actually happened in China already. And a lot of them had surplus capacity and they were already trading through global expos and everything. But nobody was online. But the American merchants and businesses were already online. So why this bug for business to business? Why not business to customer? Which is like a very obvious thing. Because when he was starting up his company, there were 10 other guys trying to get people online, the consumers online. That was a .com theory basically in the US. And these are all guys who studied in the US, Chinese people studying in the US, saw the opportunity there and come back in China to create these .com companies. But Jack could have nothing of it. The reason why he chose B2B is, so you can see all these dots in these provinces in China. And these are basically clusters of manufacturing. Just an example, okay, this is Ojai in the Wenzhou province. It makes 90% of global branded products in eyewear. When you have manufacturing scale at this level in one place, then you will need to constantly generate business in order to utilize your capacity. Sometimes the brand may not want to order something and capacity might be surplus. Can it be filled by another channel called the internet? Can these manufacturers can they access internet to sell their wares to other customers? And this was the idea for Alibaba.com. In mid 2000, a Forbes article covered Alibaba's business, and they said something like this: to see what Alibaba.com does, click on its website. You will see the electronic version of Istanbul's Great Bazaar. On offer are products such as electric motors, dried beans, even polycarbonate resin. A US buyer looking for 1,000 tennis rackets can search all the sports equipment suppliers who register on this site and review their terms of trade. If the buyer likes what he sees, he contacts the seller and they haggle. This is the keyword in English or Chinese. So creating this platform was an interesting opportunity for these merchants or smaller manufacturers who could not offload their capacity and to sell online by getting these contracts through the internet. But Jack was not just prescient about this, he was also prescient about raising money. And in 2000, you know that .com bust is just around the corner. And Jack somehow pulls a rabbit out of the hat and raises money from Goldman Sachs, $5 million and $25 million from SoftBank. And naturally, at the time of raising money, the bankers will ask, what is your business plan? I have no business plan. That was the standard answer. And it was very awkward to take him to all these rounds and meet these bankers and investors. And he says, I have no business plan. And nobody will give him money. But Goldman Sachs went on a limb to give him money just to see how this idea goes. Because they got a huge stake. They got 33% in the business at that time. So Jack always says, wrong decision is better than no decision in internet time. So he says, I don't want to make a plan which I will regret later. I might as well see how the flow of the information is going and I will go along with it. So he jumped into B2B because everybody else was focusing on B2C. And it's not really true because there are other companies who are competing with Jack and who have also done IPOs on the Nasdaq called Meet China and something like that. But these businesses had a model which was charging the customers to list themselves online. And Jack knew that being from a poor neighborhood, seeing poor businessmen trying to sell their businesses, they will never want to pay a subscription until they see how the product works. But Jack was right about internet time. So just to give an entertaining anecdote here, what happens in 1 minute on the internet today? You can see 50,000 mobile apps downloaded. You can see 200,000 photos on Instagram. Amazon can sell $200,000 worth of merchandise. You can upload 300 hours of video on YouTube in 1 minute. You can have 142 million emails sent and received. You can make 2 million minutes on Skype. You can get your identity stolen 30 times. You can take 1400 Uber rides. So this is the kind of opportunity which was probably he had foreseen, or I don't know, but he knew that in internet the timing of your business opportunity is very important. And yet he had seen in the past that he was too early with China pages and the business did not grow, which he had to take a break for a year and join the government and then again come back with Alibaba.com. But as investors are, they'll always say, show me the money. The guy had no business plan, the guy had no revenue model. All he wanted to do was get as many businessmen listed on the company's website and let them do what they want to do. He did not charge any transaction fees, he had no payment gateway, he had nothing. He just had a listing and a directory online. But now if you see Alibaba, I don't know if you can see in the back, it's a little small. But now you can see Alibaba and its 19 companies. And the biggest chunk are these three: Taobao, Tmall and AliExpress, which I will come to later. Then 1688 and Alibaba.com. And the other litany of businesses which he has started and partnered in. So investors didn't get to see the money, but eventually. But to understand how Alibaba grew and what Alibaba actually did in the 2000s, you have to understand this iconic rivalry. So this was the classic David versus Goliath story about eBay in China and Alibaba. So Jack said, and Jack is a nasty person. I mean, if you watch his interviews, he will have these amazing wise anecdotes and suddenly he will just, he'll baffle you by saying something so remarkably truthful that you will like, how can he say that on media? I mean, isn't he a CEO of a company? So this is what he said about eBay. eBay is a shark in the ocean and we are crocodile in the Yangtze River. If we fight in the ocean, we will lose. But if we fight in the river, we will win. And this guy is like, he's like a kung fu fan, martial arts fan. He's in that whole comic book iconography, and he's enjoying every moment of giving these cryptic anecdotes to people. Little did he know that people, it is actually true. He did not want to compete with eBay. He wanted eBay to come on his turf, and so that they will lose. So, this is a very important lesson in understanding local cultures and local customs when you want to create a product or a service. So this is an eBay page, and we are all used to this kind of pages. Clean, minimalist look, and a very small amount of deals being offered. You know what to expect. You know where to go. You can see all the labels correctly. Nothing is in your face. There is enough margin on the side. You can scroll, breeze through. The images will load very fast. And this is what Taobao.com looks like. It's in your face. It has everything you don't want to see at once. But apparently this is how Chinese people want to shop. They want that feel of a local bazaar when they go online to buy something. And if this is what they want, and this is what eBay was offering, there was clearly a dissonance in what services were out there. Jack may not be a great businessman at this time, but he knew people very well. So he had this dictum in his company. He said that his customers, number one, employees, number two, and then shareholders. His priority was set that shareholders will not get the first priority. I will think what a business should do, and nobody should tell me what I want to do. And he knew that a company like eBay, which was listed in the US and Wall Street on its ass, couldn't do what it wanted to do, or could adjust to what they wanted to do, but they had to listen to the street. So making Taobao free, again, Alibaba was free, Taobao also was free, and Taobao is a service which I'll explain later, but I'll just give you a brief idea. Taobao is like eBay, consumer to consumer selling, auction site, at the same time, small merchants to consumer. So just one step beyond peer-to-peer buying stuff. So Jack had this idea that if a merchant, a single shop owner, is the user of the internet, so he will behave like the same user who is going to buy online. So he created the C2C and merchant to customer relationship on Taobao, and he let them list everything for free, no transaction fees, nothing. It's completely free. People can chat, they can haggle, they can transact whichever way they want. And this started in 2003. So making Taobao free was a key way to differentiate from eBay, which collected fees from its user. We gambled that eBay would not match our move, since doing so would expose it to intense pressure from Wall Street investors who expected eBay to quickly capitalize on its $180 million investment in China. And which was true. And the outcome is here to see. So when Taobao started, they were free. And eBay was here with the highest market share. And you can, the graph is explaining itself. eBay exit to China market is 07. And Taobao is still there, thriving, growing at whatever rates, 30% plus. But this is not enough. He cracked the model much later. So the business model for charging is already proven in the States. You don't have to prove the model. You have to prove how big the market is. You have to prove that you can create value in this market. But they just did not listen. Free is still a good word for consumer to consumer because it's so premature in this market. Only 8% of internet users here have tried online shopping. So among 100 people, 92 have not tried it. And he had this idea that let people come online first, let them experience what the technology is, and then we can figure out a way to charge them. Again, no revenues, the company is existing for the past 5 years. He's raising money like crazy from wherever he could after .com bust, but he managed to somehow. And the iconic investment where, I don't know, it's an equity investment you can call, where he acquired Yahoo China and Yahoo gave him $1 billion. It's difficult to understand, but that's what he did. So with $1 billion with a revenue model, all you could do is just burn the money. And he was not burning it actually, it's very frugal. He did not hire engineers from Beijing where every hot engineer was available. He hired local students from Hangzhou who wanted to work and trained them and basically gave them shares as they spent some time in the company, which was unheard of in any startup. So in the beginning, Jack Ma has this equity donation kind of a system where he gives shares to everyone.
Does Taobao have any meaning in Chinese?
Taobao means hidden treasure. That's the real translation. I don't know exactly what it is.
That's fine.
So Jack Ma cracked the model. 16 character model of Taobao, where he started charging. There's some merchants who came to him and said, we want our listings to be on top. What do? We are big merchants, we cannot be in the second, third page of the search results. So they started this revenue model where people would pay to be on top. Like they would bid for a spot, like how we bid for advertisement online. And suddenly Taobao, from 0-1 of revenue, started flooding with cash. And if this was not enough, in 2008, one of Alibaba's team member, the current CEO of Alibaba Group, he created this model called Tmall. So, if you know what happens in China, okay, I mean this is very well documented. As a country prospers, you will see the income of people in the country also growing, services industry is growing, people start earning more money, middle class expands, and the demand for something that you see outside also increases. Everybody wants Nike shoes, they're made in China but you still want them. You want iPhones, you want all the other stuff that is available outside of China. So, well, they had the platform, they had the payment system now called Alipay. What do? You basically set up a system called Tmall, which has access to 600 million Tmall registered users. Again, the numbers are just incredible. Brands can set up their professionally designed stores online. Alibaba will manage the inventory and logistics and fulfillment, access to the entire China, real customers according to Alibaba, and a Chinese team to handle personal calls or customer queries. So if you have a platform given to brands, you will see something like this happen. Now luxury brands like Burberry sell on Tmall, where we just find stores in Phoenix for some off-beat location. Luxury brands are selling online, and these are the real brands with their own stores. Hugo Boss has a store on Tmall. Nike has a store on Tmall. That's not enough. Costco, who famously said they will never want to open a big warehouse style location in China, they have a Tmall web page. You can buy Costco items on Tmall.
So you go to Tmall's website or Costco's website?
Go to Tmall's website and search for Costco, and you will direct it to their page or any brand you want. This is, I did not get the screenshot of the homepage. It's again as crowded as the Taobao thing was. And if this is not enough, even Amazon has a store on Tmall. So what Alibaba and Jack and his team managed to do is create China's premier online shopping destination. No need to go to a mall, no need to get stuck in traffic and pollution. You just can sit at home, order branded stuff from abroad, and you get what you want. And the results are here to show. This is from last year's numbers. I know you cannot see it, I just read it out to you. So first one is Taobao Marketplace, Taobao.com. Launched 2003. It is China online shopping destination for inter-Chinese transactions. Then Tmall, started in 2008, China brands and retail platform for outsiders. Another company called I don't know how to pronounce it, I just tried. Jua Swan, whatever. Started in 2010, it's like a Groupon website where you get group deals. Together, these three, which is China commerce, as they say, manage 2,444 billion won of gross merchandise value. And if you are arithmetically savvy, that is 400 billion US dollars. That is bigger than probably America's e-commerce market. Active buyers, 350 million. We saw 400 in December's numbers. This is last March numbers. So 350 to 400 in just 9 months. Annual active sellers, more than 10 million. Again, 1688 is China wholesale marketplace. This is the original Alibaba.com idea, which is renamed now. And Alibaba.com is the global wholesale marketplace where businesses can sell abroad. 1688.com is where businesses can sell within China to other businesses. And AliExpress, which is an interesting company, which is a global marketplace where we can buy from China. And it is ridiculous. I bought a set of pencils just to deliver on time. It's still not yet, it's 20 days away. But $20 pencil box with, I know $20 is expensive for pencil. I like them. So $20 pencil box and free shipping from China. What can you ask?
What are the customs duty?
I don't think for pencil. It will be handled, I think.
No, you have to do that.
I I think in the final bill there was some amount of a pencil. I don't think there is any custom duty.
No, but in case you do the custom type, you have to actually open your box and check it.
They might, but for electronics, I guess they add it to the bill. So Amazon, if you buy something from
How many
Amazon.com,
pencils are there in this box? $20.
It's only one.
let me not embarrass myself on camera. Really nice graphite pencils. I'll show it.
I know what you're saying because I have cousins in the US and they actually have planned their kids' stationery buying and entire classes as a whole. And they actually buy stuff from AliExpress and they get it shipped to Toronto or Chicago.
It's cheaper than
And
buying
it's
it.
not cheaper.
It's not cheaper.
It is
Same brands.
A lot cheaper.
A lot
I can
cheaper.
imagine, yeah.
And they kind of schedule it in such a way, they expect a project coming up, they'll factor in the 20 days, plus or minus something, and they'll ship it. It goes down to the smallest of batteries and pencils.
It was crazy. $1 items also with free shipping. How can you afford this? I don't know, man. It's insane, but it's fun. Sorry?
Delivery time?
20 to 60 days.
Oh.
$1 with cash.
Anticipate. Enjoy the moment. So this is AliExpress, which is other people also across the world can order from China. So like I said, annual active buyers, just a trend for your information, 18 crores in July 2013 and 40 crores in December 15. The active buyers, let me remind you again, this is India's internet population, close to this. Again, Alibaba seems to have cracked the mobile model as well, obviously. You can see 68% of mobile revenue, I'm sorry, we are looking at mobile GMV as percent of total GMV. So, out of total gross merchandise value, 68% comes from mobile, which is a huge number according to me.
What is the speed of it? Just basic internet in China?
I don't know. I'll have to check.
I'm sure if you're talking these numbers, it's probably a lot faster.
They had 4G before us, so I'm assuming they will be slightly ahead. Their market is far ahead in terms of many things, logistics, even telecommunication.
Even if they are at 4G, it's very fast.
Maybe. But this is in the company's filings, so I'm not making it up. They are not making it up. But 68% of mobile revenue, like mobile, I don't know, 68% is a huge number. Flipkart would die for this number. Just to give you an idea of how the monetization is for the platform. This is how annual China retail revenue divided by annual active buyer. This is for Alibaba. So this number ideally should keep going up as they monetize the website better. And it is so far. This is for mobile, this is for overall. But you know, Alibaba is not alone. I mean, we have so far just seen Alibaba and Jack Ma and singing his praises. But there are several entrepreneurs and several businesses in China who are competing neck to neck. I mean, for example, a company called Tencent Holdings, which has a ADR traded in the US, the same market cap as Alibaba. And we use nothing of this company. Nothing. It's just Chinese market. They make games and they have a very popular application called WeChat. And WeChat is actually the doom for everything according to some VC players. They say that it's the app to kill all the apps. Because WeChat is a chatting software, but it has several other smaller apps inside that app. So you can book a taxi, you can buy groceries, you can do shopping inside the same app. You don't need to go to any other app. You don't have to go to Alibaba. So maybe Alibaba killer, I don't know. Let's see. But it's interesting that the market values both of them at the same market value. They're both in USD. Again, there's JD, which is the inventory model, homegrown company in China, America returned entrepreneur, doing very well. They are following Amazon's model to the T. They have developed their own warehouses, their fulfillment centers, exactly. But you know, Alibaba as a business is interesting, but Alibaba as a culture is even more interesting. So in the annual report of Alibaba, he used to mention that he wants to create a company that will survive at least for 80 years. And very recently he revised that number to 102 years. Don't ask me what the numbers mean, I don't know. It may be some folklore in some kung fu comic which is really. But He thinks that we have to create a company which has longevity and scale built into it, otherwise it will not grow the expectations that we have. And I think it's a very interesting goal that people know that we have to live for 102 years and you're in teens right now, so you might as well take decisions which are for the longer term rather than have managers oriented to take short-term decisions for ESOPs to gain value. This I mentioned earlier that customers come first, so services can stay free for as long as they need to. Employees second. Employees have the chance to do whatever they want in creating better platforms. And many of Alibaba's businesses have come from employees' ideas rather than Jack Ma's genius. That is his genius, I guess, to enable employees to think on their own. And shareholders always come in the end, and we will see a little bit of that flavor later. Like I said, Jack Ma is a martial art enthusiast and he practices Tai Chi. And this pose reminds me of Amazon's model of how they create their virtuous cycle of businesses. So when there are more sellers on Amazon's site and more selection, customer experience gets better, traffic increases, which generates growth, which again lowers the cost of infrastructure, lowers prices because more merchants are online, and this cycle continues to create the Amazon experience everywhere else. This is a very old chart and it is what Jeff Bezos lives by. This is Kundalini, if you want to say. And this is Alibaba's Kundalini. Pardon the drawing and the handwriting, I could not find the equivalent, so I made it myself. So it's called the Iron Triangle. So it's very simple to understand. It's e-commerce platform, have a finance and payment gateway, and logistics to support it. That's it. That is Alibaba's secret sauce probably. But wait. So I know you cannot see it, and I could not read everything. I'll just tell you what it is. So what Jack Ma has done, and because of his province that he comes from, Beijing, has a lot of entrepreneurs who have created several businesses, including logistics networks, other online companies, other services businesses which are allied to e-commerce. So these guys have cross holdings in each other's companies in the personal capacity or the company's capacity in order to enable each other. And one such example is over here called Kainia, which is a consortium of 4 logistics players which handle up to 60% of shipping for e-commerce businesses in China. And 60% is a huge number for 400 million users, active users. So that's how, this is for Bezos, this is for Alibaba and Jack Ma and his companies. But again, like I said, there is a flavor to Alibaba which leaves a very bad taste in your mouth, and there are definitely some concerns. So when you go in China, everybody talks about regulation, and I mean we are used to regulation. In India, we have restrictions on e-commerce businesses to not have 100% FDI in some areas. And so why not in China? I mean it's not bad to ask the government to encourage the local entrepreneurs to start this business and run it themselves rather than giving it to foreign investors. So regulation in China is going to be there, and it may be more pervasive than it is in India and more obstructive than it is in India. And it is an interesting thing because the regulation sometimes controls the outcomes in the business, and you will see that later. But before, if you want to take note of these books, so it's a book called Little Rice. It's on Xiaomi and written by Clay Shirky. And it's a very small book, and he mentions how Xiaomi, a manufacturing company, grew to become a global giant in selling very well designed and well made mobile phones, smartphones, at 1/10 the price of an iPhone. It gives a context of how Chinese people's mindsets have grown to accept regulation and to work within it, and in some cases go through it by various means. Again, I said this before about how Asia works and to China, which shows how painful it was in the late 80s to 90s to set up new businesses and create a set of infrastructure that we already have right now in China. So here you start getting the punches of Alibaba. Okay? So when they listed on NYSE, they had this very unique holding structure, which technically is called a variable interest entity. And we have heard of Class A shares and Class B shares, where some shareholders don't have the same voting rights as other shareholders. But what if you have no rights? You are a shareholder in a company, you have no rights. You have no claim on the assets, no claim on the profits, no claim on any corporate decisions. What will you do in that case? Will you still pay $195 billion to own this company? I'm just messing with it. Don't read this. So Alibaba Group Holdings structure is quite interesting. They have a separate layer of partners' interest in the company, which are the senior management of Alibaba Group, and they control the entire company. And everybody else is a Tenga. In various names, you can call whichever name you want, it is your Tenga. And the reason I call it Tenga is because in 2007, I guess that's the right year, Alipay.com was transferred without asking any outside shareholders into a private company which Jack Ma owned 80% stake in. And it was made public in the newspapers and shareholders were not aware. And the only reason when they found it was a small note number 8 in Yahoo.com's results, some quarterly results. That's when everybody realized what Alibaba actually is. And if you can transfer something, and the biggest shareholder at that time was Yahoo.com, couldn't have a say in that. What kind of a company are you running? This is not listed at that time. But why does Alipay matter? So, like I said, the iron triangle has one end of the triangle into finance. It's a payment gateway and a way to pay easily online. And Alipay is that structure, which has 51% market share as of last year. It must have increased probably. And they have a payment wallet, which everybody uses for transacting on Tmall, Taobao, and is accessible across platforms. And Alipay, for that matter, also has a mutual fund, a money market mutual fund, which manages some crazy amount of money, $100 billion or something. It has plans to start an NBFC, it has a lending business, it wants to start a bank. So, okay, if you read the book and you get an interesting backstory about how the boardroom wars happened between Yahoo, then SoftBank and Jack Ma, and trying to defend each other as to why they had the rights to know why Alipay was transferred. 51% market share in payments is a good deal to lose actually. And as of yesterday's article, the company that owns Alipay is worth $60 billion, which could have been part of the Alibaba group. And Jack Ma has his reasons. He says that I was forced by the regulator in order to run my business, the payment gateway business. He was told that no outside investor should be there, and so I had to take it off on my personal account. Nice, convenient. Tenpay.com is another payment gateway or a payment system created by Tencent by the name. And when Jack Ma, like I said, he has these nasty things to say in media. He said that the growth of Tencent company is like Pearl Harbor for Alibaba. I mean, it just happened. You can't figure out what to do now, and it's not too big. And they compete on so many levels, like little children, in acquiring stakes in taxi companies. Wherever Tencent will go, Alibaba will put a stake in that same company. Wherever Tencent will go abroad, he will go. So Lyft, if you know, taxi hailing app, has stakes of both Tencent and Alibaba. UnionPay is the government service which has naturally 11.5%. You will not see Visa, MasterCard, nothing in this. It's a completely different ecosystem. It can be a different planet for all you know, but they have their own things that happen over there. So one of the biggest concerns why Alibaba or Jack Ma is pulled down in public every time by American retailers associations or other developed country retailers is the sale of counterfeit goods. So when you sell something on Tmall on your own site, you are verbally, and you're competing with your own product, which is 1/10 the price. And sometimes even the brand maker cannot distinguish if the product is actually a fake or a real one. And there's an interesting mention in the book called late shifts, late shift manufacturing, where the same factory, they will work 1 extra hour and use the residual material from the same batch to create these products, which will be of the same quality, same name. It's absolutely amazing. So Jack Ma does fight this like it's cancer, and he just does say that we try very hard to eliminate counterfeit goods. And if you read the book, you will get to see how they have really put extensive efforts. So in Taobao, where it's peer-to-peer and they cannot be the mediators, they have put these mediators in between, like the internal FBI or CBI, whatever. So they will study these patterns of transactions and they will basically haul the merchant to the side. So the reason why Alibaba, the Tmall and Taobao work is they track these transaction volumes between merchants and sellers. So if a merchant is having more volumes, he will be above in the rankings for free. And if a merchant is having lower volumes, he will go down, even if selling the same product. So, lot of merchants used to set up fake IDs of users. So they used to hire these click farms and create 20 million accounts on Taobao who will buy goods, and they basically ship empty boxes to them just to show that volume was done. So now since data analytics has taken place and we know it can be used to monitor transactions, Alibaba has been using these models to find these fraudulent volumes and to ban these merchants. But again, banning them, they will come up with some different name on the site and you will never know that they were actually the ones. So it's a challenge. They are trying to fight it. They've also hired, I think, an ex-Interpol guy or somebody to monitor Tmall. Because in Tmall also, the brands are selling next to the other guys. The reason I wanted to look at Alibaba is also to get an understanding of the e-commerce market in China, but to really see if Alibaba can come to India or not. So if you look at models like Flipkart and Amazon, fine, we have cash on delivery. What else? I mean, people like to pay in cash, but what else? What else do Indians like to do online, which they do on the street? I don't think any company has still figured it out in India. And despite being Indian entrepreneurs, they have this elite user model where only the rich users who have credit cards will be able to transact more often, and the other guys will, okay, cash on delivery, you figure it out. But it has trained their business models beyond their ability to scale. And the guy standing next to Mr. Modi is saying that okay, he can do something better. So Alibaba does have stake in Paytm right now, and maybe some other companies I'm not aware of. But let me give you an idea of the entire universe of Alibaba and the services that they provide. Like I mentioned, Taobao, Tmall, AliExpress, we saw 1688, Alibaba, and these are the comparable businesses. eBay, Amazon in the US, in the Europe also eBay, Amazon. By the way, eBay is 1/7 of Alibaba's value right now. Just FYI. Tokopedia in Southeast Asia, I don't know what it is. Lazada. In India it is Flipkart and Snapdeal because they are marketplaces. Again, for B2B marketplace, we have Manta in US, which I don't know what it is. Solo Stocks in Europe. Praladi, I have no idea. Tolexo in India. Anybody seen Tolexo? You use it very often?
Fantastic.
It works very well.
So it's more for the business.
B2B, so B2B.
It's fantastic.
So what is the average thing that you buy? Just get shares.
I buy pretty much all my safety equipment for my guys. Pretty much they have measuring instruments, right from your workman shoes to airframes to like minor headlamps and everything.
That can be an interesting model to track. They also have a travel website, travel portal, just like Expedia or MakeMyTrip. The Kainyao logistics business, which is equal to delivery. Again, Kainyao is a consortium of several logistics players. I can't pronounce this. Cowbay. It's an interesting model. So Alibaba is trying to do an offline to online model where the habit of people to go to stores and just see the product and buy it online for cheap. He's trying to actually use it for his advantage by buying these retail stores and having minimal inventory for showrooming, literally, and let people buy it there itself online and go to the road. Which I found very interesting model. Urban Lab apparently in India is doing the same thing. I don't know. Are they? Anybody is in Urban Lab? Again, like I said, they are into cloud computing, just like Amazon, Cloud Sigma, in India. They also have navigation companies, AutoNavi, which works like Google Maps and Map My India. They have a online video site called Youku, which is like YouTube, Dailymotion, or Book in Southeast Asia. They have a browser. Okay, UC browser. Maybe Chinese people use it, I don't know. We have never heard of it. They have a media company called South China Morning Post and other newspapers. Alibaba Pictures, famously. My introduction to the presentation pattern. And this is the interesting part, which is linked intricately with the Alibaba's business, but not part of the Alibaba group, and financial, which has the Alipay. It has a bank called mybank.cn, Alipay, Sesame Credit, UBOB is the money market mutual fund, which is called leftover treasure. And I can't pronounce this. Chinatown. This is like Fair Cent. Have you tried Fair Cent, anyone? It's an Indian website apparently. This chart was from the company Traction. I guess it's an Indian blog. It's interesting to actually see everything in this way. Because Alibaba themselves don't show interest. So great. That's it from me. And if you have any questions, I would like to take them. Thank you.
I have one. The whole emphasis is on the English language. Whether it is IES, IFS, IRS, Railways, Police, even the websites of the Indian government are in English, some of them are in Hindi.
All of them are in Hindi.
Yeah, but that's all. But we have 22 languages in the constitution. And Hindi speaking population is only 40%. Now, we have we've been able to convince the government to convert everything to 22 languages. We have a lot of correspondence. For the last 2 years we've been writing to them. Even the Indian rupee note is in 15 Indian languages, not in all. What I'm trying to say is that if you see the success of Alibaba, it is because everything was in Mandarin. So the local people could understand.
Yes.
The volumes will come from there. This English speaking population in India is only 8%. As of today, 7-8%. It may increase in the future. I mean, if Chowkidar says good morning, doesn't mean he can handle English on his cell phone, you know. So the question is, I do not understand. I have not understood, and maybe you can explain as to why our Indian so-called very clever guys are not going into the Indian languages. For example, the search engine in Korea is all in Korean. Nobody can enter. Even Google cannot enter Korea. The question is, we have somehow got this legacy of the British, which has not gone away from our DNA. That's my question.
So the question is, in the back if you haven't heard, why aren't Indian e-commerce websites in regional languages and apps in regional languages, and why are they only in English when there is a small base of English speaking people? And the answer is I don't know. Honestly, I don't know.
But there's a big opportunity.
Trade India and some of those websites, you already have those options where you can click and you can convert it to Hindi or German or Spanish or whatever. And people have those options, like Google Translate.
No, it has to be seamless, right? Like
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
I'll just show you.
Exactly, understand what you're saying.
I just want to add one more line to this. Google understands India is in 9 Indian languages. Oracle understands India is in 11 Indian languages. And MS, Microsoft is in about 15 Indian languages. So the foreigners understand India as far as language is concerned. But somehow the Indians have not understood this. This is my observation, maybe I am wrong.
No, you're not wrong. You're absolutely correct.
And I think unless we do that, Indian Alibaba will not emerge.
I think the biggest e-commerce company in India is a PSU called irctc.com, which was recently valued at $20 billion. I was shocked when LIC put 5% for, $1 billion. And IRCTC has regional language, which is seamlessly flowing through the entire platform.
Yeah.
So that I guess something can
I
learn.
hope and pray that happen.
Customers demanded
Can't hear you. Can you just speak up? Snapdeal.
About 9 or 10 Indian languages as well as less than 5% sales coming from that. Because today you have only about 30 or 40 million actual shoppers in India who are shopping online. My assumption would be probably 90% of them would be English speaking.
30 or 40 million only.
Only.
Wow. We are a long way. It's interesting. So, what he said is Snapdeal is in 8 languages. But only 30 to 40 million active buyers are there.
Last year.
But what I don't understand is this is there, right? When he's saying that. That's what he's saying, right? The opportunity is not being proven yet. So why give up at the first step? Because there is no volume. It's a chicken and egg problem. Somebody has to come up first so that other people will notice it and they will start using it.
Like I think if you look at your last chart where you compare all the companies, right? India, in the last few years, Amazon has made a big headway, which is making Flipkart sweat. I'm sure it's making Snapdeal sweat also.
Quite possible. What I find interesting is all of these companies suddenly stopped disclosing their gross merchandise value. Suddenly. There's a very scathing article on the website in Mint today, on Flipkart.
Your third slide, if you can just go over those turnover figures. What is the B2B and what is B2C? Given the figure, it's on your third slide. Still before. Just go back.
Number is not there. So basically they provide their China commerce retail platform, which includes Taobao, Tmall, Alibaba, AliExpress, Alibaba, 1688, all of them. They comprise 83%. Total sales is $12 billion in the company as of financial year 15. 12 billion dollars only.
That's all?
Net sales. Because so many of these things are free right now. So it will monetize. That's why this chart is necessary. The monetization curve that they have shown.
I guess with 4G coming in into India in a big way, mobile phones coming in a big way, a lot of these things should start happening in the country.
But didn't they have some kind of a crazy Alibaba? There's some kind of a crazy one-day sale that beat like Amazon's entire year sale in one day.
About 4 times. So it's called Singles Day, which is on 11th of November every year. Alibaba, this Tmall had started the sale. Singles Day last year did 4 times the sales of what happened at Black Friday or Cyber Monday in the US. Because sheer volumes, right? And he feeds into it. He creates these huge Olympic size ceremonies for that day with all foreign celebrities coming in. It's quite insane.
How came across 2 websites of India, Trade India and India Mart. So I think they are into the same kind of field, right?
They are big listings.
But B2B market.
B2B only.
Okay, so like how they are doing? Any idea?
No idea. What I find interesting is one company called Just Dial, and they have reached to some extent of listing merchants online. But I don't know if they are really interested in figuring out the other leg, how to enable millions of people to start using Just Dial or transactions, just like Alibaba did in the beginning. I don't know, it's not too much to ask because you already have the database of merchants. Why can't you monetize it properly? Why do you have to ask them to pay first to come up in the listings? Can you start selling something? I don't know. Anybody has seen Just Dial? Yash is here? I don't know. Anybody has the answer to Just Dial? I would like to, it's something I would like to answer to Just Dial's business model. Because they have listings. Can you use them in any way to create transactions between users? I think it's too much to ask because it's too late. Because the users have moved to Flipkart, Amazon, and they're comfortable using those platforms. Then just to recap the resources, if you haven't taken them down, if you want to read them, I'll urge you to read this book over this Alibaba's World. Alibaba's World you can watch in the documentary, it's the same thing. This book has far more cultural context of China and the e-commerce growth in the Chinese market. The documentary is available on YouTube, so you can watch it. Little Rise is on Xiaomi and the manufacturing revolution in smartphones and other electronics. How Asia works is about Southeast Asia and China and the political scenarios in each country. It's a little dense, it's like a research paper, but it's still interesting to figure out those details. And Mr. China is like a nice story of how people were swindled in China when they did the first ever FDI in China. Thank you.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.